born overnight.
I believe in reason and common sense.
Leith Van Onselen from Macro Business with the Treasury of Common Sense.
Common sense never goes out of style.
He's with us again this morning, Leith Van Onselen from macrobusiness.com.au. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, good, thanks, Luke. How about yourself?
Yeah, travelling well. Plenty of good things to talk about this week, including some observations about unemployment numbers. But we'll start where we've kind of called home over the last probably month or two. And I sit here, Leith, and I think to myself, we've got the government going through all sorts of pain to try and get more dwellings built in Australia. Fair enough. But at the same time as they're doing that, as you and I have noted now for some time, we've got this rapid immigration. This is something that you've been talking about forever. And Shane Oliver, who I know we both respect highly from AMP, he's joined the throng this week, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. Look, Shane Oliver's, a really good economist. He's the chief economist for AMP. He's been sort of front and centre for about 2 decades in this, in the Australian economic sphere, and he's very well respected. He's very good, just very logical sort of guy. And he basically he went and attended the Tuesday's AFR Property Summit, and he basically came out and said, they're obviously talking about the housing crisis, and he just said point blank that Australia's housing crisis is basically because we ramped up immigration levels by about 150,000 a year since 2005. And what that's basically done is it's basically created a permanent housing shortage because construction hasn't been able to keep up with that massive population growth. And so what he's basically saying is here, we've pumped the nation full of people. Surprise, surprise, house prices have become expensive. We've got a housing affordability problem. So his solution, and very logical, is just to recalibrate immigration levels so that basically immigration levels are commensurate with the nation's ability to supply homes, which is exactly what I've been saying for donkey's years, as well as infrastructure I've been saying, and also the environmental carrying capacity. And, another guy who's also really good, he's he's the head of SQM Research, Louis Christopher, came out straight after with Shane Oliver, and he's basically said that we need to have a migration cap of 90,000 a year for 2 years. And he thinks that that'd be enough to basically for housing supply to catch up with demand, and it should clear the rental shortage. So, we've got two pretty serious people out there who've just basically called for lower immigration, have basically said that this crisis in housing is caused by the federal government basically running immigration way too hard. And just as a quick reminder, the last week's national accounts for the June quarter said that Australia's population's grown by 626,000 people last financial year. Now, that's like adding a Canberra and a Hobart in a year to the nation's population. And obviously, when you run numbers like that, you're going to have a housing problem. And that's exactly what we're saying. We've got rental vacancy rates at record low, we've got double-digit rental rises across the capital cities, you've got people being forced to live in group housing, homelessness. We've all read the articles, we've all seen the stories. And this is basically directly caused by the federal government's huge immigration program. So they just need to basically pare it back. It's not rocket science. It's completely logical, and it'll solve the problem.
You simply cannot take a politician serious. You can't take them seriously if they're saying to you, we're going to solve this housing crisis, the rental crisis, whatever it might be, low-cost dwellings, and not in the same sentence comment on immigration. And Louis Christopher, who I've spoken to a number of times on this show, and he is probably without peer in terms of statistics around rental properties and the like. If he says that we catch up if we pause migration, we don't cut it out. We go back to 90,000, near enough to the long-term average, for 2 years, and that gets rid of the rental crisis, then what sort of idiot ignores that sort of advice, mate?
Yeah, and absolutely. And Louis is a really sensible guy. He's an excellent property analyst. He's not extremist or anything. He's just a really sensible sort of bloke. And it's just so logical for pretty much anyone who's doesn't have a vested interest in this. To see what we're doing is wrong. And you can, it's not just about housing, it's obviously about infrastructure as well. We've got infrastructure shortages everywhere, and schools and hospitals, and you name it. And as I keep saying, we've grown the population by 7.4 million people this century, which is extraordinary amount of people in a short period of time. We've got a population of 26.3 million at the moment. Well, we were under 20 at the turn of the century, and we've all seen the result. We've seen housing shortages. We've seen infrastructure problems. We've got shortages across schools and hospitals, and soon we're going to have water supply shortages once the next drought kicks in, like we did 4 years ago. Basically, you can't. Immigration is the everything problem. If it's run too hot, I mean, it doesn't have to be a problem, but unfortunately, when you run it as aggressively as we have been since 2005, it becomes a problem. It's a bit like salt. Like, a little bit of salt to your dish is good, and it makes it taste better, and But if you add too much, it ruins the dish, and if you add ridiculous amounts, it becomes toxic. Yeah. And I think we're sort of at that toxic level at the moment, where it's just way, way too much. And before we're at the sort of, it tasted bad, before COVID, when it was just too high, but it wasn't ridiculously high. Now it's just obscene. I mean, you can't have 400,000 plus migrants coming in a year and expect to basically cater for them.
No. Unemployment numbers out in Roy Morgan. Where do you think unemployment goes?
Yeah, look, I mean, definitely, the unemployment rate's already heading up. So you got two surveys. You got the official surveys, the ABS survey, which comes out every month, and that has a tighter definition of unemployment than Roy Morgan, but they both usually track each other very closely. And the ABS survey of unemployment has already been ticking higher. So we've had 0.2% increase in unemployment over the past few months. So not a huge amount, but it has been going up. The Roy Morgan survey, which is the alternative one, that's actually, and it usually leads the ABS. So it tends to move up and down before the ABS does, just the way the data's measured. That recorded a massive jump, nearly a 2% jump in August, and it's now tracking 11%, which is that survey's highest unemployment level since March 2021 during the middle of the pandemic. So effectively, unemployment's now rising very quickly according to the survey. And basically, the explanation of it is not that we're not creating jobs. We created 161,000 jobs in the last year, according to Roy Morgan. The problem is, again, it's this immigration issue. We've had a record labour supply growth in the last year of nearly 500,000. So we've added 500,000, nearly 500,000 to the workforce, and we've created 161,000 jobs. Well, the problem is that's a difference. There's a difference there of over 300,000, and that difference is what's driving up unemployment. And effectively what it's saying is, if we keep doing this, if we keep bringing all these workers, we don't have the demand for those workers because the economy is slowing because of the RBA rate hikes and what have you. We're going to have higher unemployment as well. And this is basically, sort of dynamite for the federal government, because the federal government's effectively created a rental crisis, which has got a lot of people very angry, and rightfully so. We've got real wages falling at the fastest pace in history. So they're angry about that. And that's partly it's mostly due to the high inflation. But it's also, partly due to this mass population growth, which has kept a lid on wage growth. And then now we've got rising unemployment as well because of this huge surge in immigration. There just isn't the demand to soak up these people. There's not the homes to house them. There isn't the infrastructure to cater for them. And this is just basically going to create a real problem for the federal government. And just another thing on the unemployment thing, SEEK's got an alternative survey, and that compares the average number of applications per job. And basically that level is higher than it was pre-pandemic. So what it's saying is, we're bringing all these people, and even though we've got more, we've still got quite a lot of job vacancies, the number of applications per job now is running at way higher than it was pre-pandemic now, which is just another sign that we're flooding the labour market with workers, and there isn't a demand for these workers. So effectively, the unemployment rate as measured by the ABS is going to start rising, and probably rising pretty quickly.
We had that Jobs and Skills Summit. We had business groups calling for workers. We've got massive skill shortages, and we've had massive immigration. Tell me that problem's been solved at least.
Well, no. Look, I mean, unfortunately, Luke, for the last 20 odd years, we've had this so-called skills shortage problem. It's never been solved. And businesses basically always complain about it, and they will, no matter how many people we bring in. So, I've said this before. 20 years ago, the Howard government did a Senate inquiry into skills, and it had all the usual players: Business Council, Australian Industry Group, Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And literally there, you could change the date to 2023, and it would read exactly the same as what it would read today. And basically in 2002, they said, we've got big skills shortages, aging population, we need to bring in a whole bunch of migrants to solve it. And guess what? We've brought in about, the population's increased by about 7 million since then, mostly through migration. And the skills shortages are worse than ever. And all this tells you is that it doesn't work importing people to solve skills. And the simple reason for that, if you bring in 1 million construction workers to solve the housing crisis, you might solve that problem, but then all those people need, they have kids, they've got to send to school, they've got to go have hospitals, they've got to have roads. So then you create shortages in all these other areas. So then you've got to bring people in for that. Then that creates shortages in other areas. And then you end up, at the end of it, basically with another building shortage because you've kept doing this tail wagging the dog policy of bringing in people to basically whack-a-mole, solve one problem, which creates another problem. Then you try and solve that. It's this sort of never-ending perpetual Ponzi scheme. And that's effectively what we've had when we've had this 7 million plus population increase this century, mostly through migration, and this perpetual skills shortage that's never been solved. We're effectively importing people to solve skill shortages caused by the immigration of last year, which has created demand in all these areas.
Macrobusiness.com.au, check it out. We do every day, and you get all this kind of gear there in your inbox. Good to talk to you, Leith. Catch you next week, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Anytime.